Welcome again to Stepping Stones. I'm excited to be here. Welcoming those of you on our YouTube channel, Facebook Live, and in person. I'm in the middle of the Amazing Stories series. This is a recurring series. I do it every summer, and I love the Bible, and I love the Bible stories, so I'm bringing you some different ones this year. And this week, it's about King Solomon. And Solomon was indeed a big shot. He was a big deal. And I'm going to talk a little bit about him. He was the son of King David. He was the wisest of all kings and the richest. He was the one who built the temple. I think David had wanted to do it, and God said, nah, not quite yet. And so Solomon was able to take the place they worship God from being a tent, a tabernacle, to making it a building, which is pretty cool. He wrote some books of the Bible, wrote many of the Proverbs, wrote the Song of Songs, we sometimes call it the Song of Solomon. It's about romantic love, but it is also an analogy of our love for God in there. And of course, he wrote Ecclesiastes, my favorite book, and that's where I'm going to be getting a lot of the stuff for today's story. But Solomon was very rich, he was very wise, and he accomplished a lot in life. He truly was a big deal, a big shot. And so I want to get started today. If you have your message notes, point number one, we're going to get right into it. I want to talk about Solomon's wealth. Right? He was a rich guy. He made a lot of money. His wisdom helped him. He made a lot of money in trade, and also because of that, like the house of God was built out of cedar, because I guess Lebanon nearby had a lot of great cedar wood, so we traded. But because of their strength and the power of the nation that God blessed them with, Solomon made all sorts of deals. People paid tribute, and so he just had a lot of money. He was richer than any king before him. That's the next blank. Richer than anyone before him. And the wealth of Solomon and his kingdom was so overwhelming. The standard of living was unlike anything we could relate to now. In fact, I'm going to share one verse from 1 Kings 10, verse 21, that just shares a little bit about this. It says, all of Solomon's drinking cups were solid gold. Now, we're not talking gold-plated. We're talking solid gold, okay? As were all the utensils in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. I can't imagine eating with a solid gold fork, right? I mean, and the beauty is it doesn't tarnish like silver, right? You don't ever have to polish it. It's just all solid gold. It says they were not made of silver, for silver was considered worthless in Solomon's days. And he was so rich that silver was like, yeah, it was just silver, no big deal. I can't even imagine such a thing. Nothing but the best for Solomon. Gold cups, gold utensils, and it's hard to believe though that about this silver thing being so common. But basically, silver was like dirt. It was just so common. Everyone's got silver. You don't make anything fancy out of that. Very rich, and But also, in addition to being rich, Solomon was very wise. God had given him supernatural wisdom. Now, wisdom's an interesting thing. We tend to think of wisdom as knowledge. You know everything. But wisdom is beyond that. Wisdom is a way of looking at things where you see it from all angles. You know, most of the things in life we think we see pretty clearly from our perspective. But wisdom is being able to say, well, it's not just how I look at it, but here's how it is from over there. Here's how God views it. So you can kind of see the big picture and everything. Solomon was like that. And as a result of his great white riches and his incredible wisdom, he kind of had an agenda. He wanted to do some great things in life. And so I'm calling this point number 2, Solomon's quest. He had a plan. He was driven to discover the secrets and the mysteries of life. He wanted to understand everything. He wanted to experience everything firsthand. And so a big part of his quest, believe it or not, was to experience and understand everything. I mean, I get some of that. I like to experience a lot, and I like to understand a lot. But Solomon was over the top here. But unfortunately, it wasn't what he expected. I want to share from Ecclesiastes in chapter 1, starting with verse 16. And he says, I said to myself, look, I am wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I set out to learn everything, from wisdom to madness and folly. But I learned firsthand that pursuing all this is like chasing the wind. That's a little sad. If you've read any in Ecclesiastes, my favorite book, you're going to find that's a common theme. He doesn't find a lot of fulfillment. So he's going to learn about everything, but he found it's like chasing the wind. It says then it gets really sad. It says, the greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. And to increase knowledge only increases sorrow. I'm like, wow. So, King Solomon, really, a big deal guy, or a big shot guy, wisest of any kings before him, wealthier than any kings or people before him. He's positioned with his wealth, wisdom, and power to do just about anything in life. And so he sets out, I'm going to discover everything I can about life. I want to experience whatever I can. But he lets us know that it didn't bring the fulfillment. The theme of Ecclesiastes is meaningless. Everything's meaningless. Whereas I read it in the King James many decades ago, vanity of vanities, all is vanities. In other words, it just doesn't seem like there's much fulfillment in life. It's like chasing the wind. And he found out that the more he knew, it just increased his grief. Sometimes they say ignorance is bliss. Sometimes the more you know, the more you realize how hard life is. And to increase knowledge only increase sorrow. Very sad. It's a reminder to me, and this is why I love the book of Ecclesiastes, it's a reminder that fulfillment and joy in life only come from the Lord. You can't get them just from the things of this world. We get a little of it, right? Like, who doesn't like a great barbecue on Memorial Day, getting together with family, like it? So there's some things in life that do, but ultimately, if that's what we're looking for, it's going to leave us short. It's going to leave us empty. But Solomon, he put a lot of work into this quest. He really wanted to use wisdom to figure everything out in life. The next line, his quest was to use wisdom to figure out life. He wanted to figure everything out and experience it all. He was determined to use the gift of wisdom God had given him, his ability to see all angles on situations in life, to figure out the secrets of life. He wanted to know what it was all about. What is worthwhile to do? What has lasting impact? All the same things we search for, right? He truly wanted to live and experience the best life. I think if Solomon was around today doing that, he would have a lot of followers, because that's like the American dream. He tried it all. In fact, I think he tried all the stuff we Americans try. But he did it better. He did it more thorough. So I want to read just a sample from Ecclesiastes chapter 2, starting with verse 4. Just a little bit of how he tried to do this. He said, I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself, right? We know how to do that, right? He didn't build just a huge home. He built huge homes, right? And by planting beautiful vineyards, I made gardens and parks, filled them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. So he was an engineer too. He didn't just build, just a garden. He built the irrigation system. It says, I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. A lot of wealth, a lot of accumulation. It says, I collected great sums of silver and gold. the treasure of many kings and provinces. He says, I hired wonderful singers. It's like he had in-house bands in the palace, we're going to listen to tonight. I heard wonderful singers, both men and women. And of course, we know Solomon had a thing for women. He says, and I had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. Right? And so if you read, one of the next steps is to read chapter 2 or all of Ecclesiastes. This is just a piece of what Solomon did. He tried many more things than this. But this short passage shows how serious he was. He was doing things that if we would accomplish one of those things in our life, we'd be like, look what I did. I built a park, or I designed and built this house for myself, Most of us feel like if we get our first house or we build a house, we've arrived. Or for some, like that's the starter house, and then you move to the good one. But so we get that part of it, I can't imagine, I can imagine the vineyards and gardens or parks, and irrigate. Imagine when he would walk around on them on a pleasant day, thinking, I designed this, I put those trees there, they just irrigate themselves. Most of us enjoy the outdoors, I think of Solomon, I think maybe something like the Arboretum, but probably bigger. And so those of us that love nature and outdoors, we think, man, this is huge what he was doing. I can't imagine what it must have been like for him. It must have been very wonderful. I know for me, I'm a little outdoorsy gardener thing. Karen and I, every year we plant a little backyard garden. It's just like 8 by 8 or 10 by 10. Sorry, the guy who cuts the grass blows all the helicopters into it, so it looks really trashy, but it's not. But we only have like a dozen plants, and we get excited. We prepare the soil and fertilize it. We put down the ground cloth and we plant everything, and then we wait. For just hope to get a few vegetables in the summer. And I know it's silly, but even with this little garden, I'll head out. I have to walk past it to get to the car, and sometimes I'm like, I'm going to go look at the garden. Just look, and I'll stare at it. And like, look at those little plants, man. I'm going to eat some tomatoes and some cilantro or whatever. I love it. And then I compare that to Solomon. Like, wow, this guy knew what he was doing. He was like a professional. And he had more than that. He had household servants, riches of flocks and herds. I like the musicians. I would have never thought if I got rich, I'd get my own band. I'd give him a room in the house and like, okay, play some R&B for dinner tonight. That's so cool. And of course the women, that was really his downfall. And then of course, silver gold. But by even, we have some rich people today. You think of like, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. These guys that, they're like Solomon in some ways. They have all this ambition and all this money and power. They're going to do stuff with it. But Solomon he did amazing things, and his quest was outrageous. I think if I could do one piece of that, that would be really great. But if we were to read, I'm just giving you a piece of this. If you read through his life and see the amazing things he did, it's outrageous. I can't imagine doing all that in a lifetime. But as is the theme of the book, and as we already read about in chapter 2, it left him unsatisfied. And that's I don't know about you, but I find that disturbing because he's doing the American dream. He's doing the stuff that many of us live for. Like, this is what I want to do. He's like, yeah, it just didn't really fulfill. And so, continuing in Ecclesiastes 2, starting at verse 9, he said, so I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labor. So he even got the part where, what it feels like when you do like a really hard physical day's work, or if you don't do that, if you like work at a computer, you're just like, I've never understood this. There's some days I'll work and it's like, I had this much in mind and I got that much done. But then there are other days I'm like, I want to do this much, and I'm like, look, I did this. Like, it's like I worked hard and I accomplished, and there's this satisfaction. And Solomon, he understands that too. I worked hard. He says, but as I looked at everything I'd worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anymore. so sad. This is definitely not what we want to hear, right? We don't want to hear, yeah, I did all this, yeah, it didn't really make me happy. And so you wonder, how could someone who has so much influence, wealth, power, wisdom, enjoy it so little? Why does Solomon feel it's so meaningless? He's the top dog. He's the big man. He's the king of one of the, at that time, probably the greatest country. People were paying tribute to stay at peace with him. And he's doing the kind of things most of us would be like, oh, I would love to do some of those. He does this kind of things as his quest that we would do, like we plan vacations to do, or when we have a holiday weekend, like Memorial Day weekend, we're like, I'm going to do these great things. But his conclusion is it really doesn't make him happy. It's very sad to me. And so, kind of to bring this together, Ecclesiastes is a picture of King Solomon. It's filled with such wisdom, but no happiness. Solomon's so rich, he's able to do so much with it, but he doesn't enjoy it. And the conclusion is, the scholars tend to think that it's because his heart wasn't right with God. He started out good, but he got lost. Solomon's story is about getting lost in his wealth and in the women and all the other stuff that he had. He did the things that kings were warned not to do by God, which was they think the biggest reason for this was he married all these foreign women. Now, this wasn't a racial thing. It wasn't that he shouldn't marry foreign women because they weren't good enough. It was he shouldn't marry them because they had foreign gods. And when you're in a relationship with someone, they influence you. And God warned, if you marry all these foreign women, which was common to make treaties, right? You marry the daughter of the Egyptian king or some other foreign, and then you made peace. You were family now. It made for great treaties. But God said, don't do that because those wives will turn you to their gods. And that's what happened. Solomon built temples and things to these foreign gods, and it just took his heart away from the Lord. And one thing I know is that when you fall away from God, when you harden your heart, backslide, whatever you want to call it, nothing makes you happy. I had some times like that in my young adult period where I was, so passionate for the Lord, and then I just fell, and I was just nothing made me happy. I get it, and so I believe that Solomon really had wisdom, but I don't think he always followed it. Right? It's one thing to have the wisdom, but then the actions have to follow it. And so Solomon kind of has to come to a conclusion. Right? Solomon's conclusion in chapter 5 is he says he gives us some really great wisdom. Basically, he sort of sums up his conclusion about wealth. And so, point number 3, Solomon's conclusion. And I want to pick up from Ecclesiastes 5 and read verses 10 through 12. He says, "Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness." So even though Solomon didn't find much fulfillment, he also realized, he was wise enough to know, wealth doesn't do it. He says, the more you have, the more people come to help you spend it, right? So it's a burden. You're going to have friends and family telling you what you should do with it, how you should help them. It says, so what good is wealth? Except perhaps to watch it slip through your fingers. Wow. He says, and then he says, people who work hard sleep well, whether they eat little or much, but the rich seldom get a good night's sleep. Wow. So Solomon has all this wealth and money, and he even uses it to do great things, and none of it brings him fulfillment. But I think the big reason was he had fallen away from the Lord. He turned his heart to other things. But he also realizes what a trap money accumulation, wealth, and stuff is. And so the next blank is wealth doesn't bring fulfillment. I mean, we all know that. I find it ironic that at church we say, we know money doesn't make you happy, wealth doesn't bring fulfillment, but yet we all seem to be looking to get more money, because I think we know there's a basic amount of money you need, but beyond that, it doesn't really bring fulfillment. And so Solomon goes further, and I love the way this is worded. Getting wealth not only doesn't bring fulfillment, it can create problems. People want to tell you how to spend it, or they want a piece of it. It slips through your finger. Wealth is temporary. It comes and it goes. And it's very easy to lose what you have. Then he observes that regular people seem to have it better. Rich people are worried. They're stressed. They don't sleep well. But poor people have less worries. I don't know if I can say it's poor people or regular people have less worries, right? Rich people, wealthy people are stressed out about what they're going to do with what they have. And I think we even Americans, who are the richest of most people in the world, understand the more stuff you have, the more stuff you have to deal with, the more stress it brings. And so Solomon's life and these writings are really a warning to us. Don't lose your focus on God. Solomon had a lot of stuff, a lot of wealth, a lot of projects. He even used it to do great things. But the reality is the more we have, the more worries and the more stress we have. So be content with what you have, and don't let your stuff become too important to you. Make sure you love God and serve Him above all else. I remember talking with my dad in his retirement years, and he told me that as a kind of I don't think as a young man, definitely as a middle-aged man, he had a goal to be a millionaire. He wanted to have $1 million. So $1 million today is much more common. But my dad was born during the Depression, and worked through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. And he was very good with money. Didn't go into debt. Saved a lot. Invested a lot. And things started to accumulate, and I think he got to the point where he thought, man, I think I can make $1 million. But then he told me, he said, but I gave up that goal, and I was really glad to see it. I think it was when he married my stepmom, and he just said he was focused more on his relationship with her and family and things like that, and all of a sudden the accumulation of wealth wasn't as big a deal. And he said, so he gave up the goal. I was really glad to hear it, because money is a trap, right? King Solomon knew that. He was this big deal, big shot guy. He had money, he had power, he had wisdom that would help him to increase it, and it did. But he learned that without God, when you push God down, make him, just kind of be religious or whatever, and I'm just going to focus on other things, that when you do that, nothing brings fulfillment. And I think it's so much worse for him, because he started close to God. He had some personal encounters with God. God said to him, I don't know if it was in a dream or a vision, but he came to him and said, ask whatever you want. You rule the people of Israel. You rule my people. What can I do for you? And God was so pleased that Solomon said he wanted wisdom so he could rule the people well. And God said, well, because you asked for wisdom and not for long life or to kill all your enemies, so I'm going to bless you with riches as well as wisdom. And so Solomon knew what it was like to walk close to God, and then he got so caught up in his stuff, his kingdom, and women. That was his downfall, that he lost focus. And he got off track. And I think the reason I love Ecclesiastes is because it's such a cautionary tale. Here's a guy who had wisdom, who had it, but he missed it. He lost it. He lost his focus on God. He did what he was warned not to do. And as a result, life became meaningless to him. All these great things that if we could pick one of them to do, we'd be like, man, that was a great accomplishment. None of it brought him any joy. And so I think, as the saying goes, he was focused more on the creation rather than the creator. He was focused more on stuff and not on God. And so to me, that's the message of Solomon's life. He was a big shot, and we can learn so much from him. But let's learn from his wisdom and learn from his mistakes. We don't have to follow his example. So that's the message today of Solomon, King Solomon. So I want to focus now on next steps. So how do we respond to this? And what can we do? What can we learn? And so the next steps are on the back of your message notes, back of your Connect cards. And the first is I'm going to commit to Solomon's wisdom, to listen to Solomon's wisdom and make God or keep God the number one thing in my life. So we can learn from his wisdom without making the same mistakes. To me, that's true wisdom. It's easy to lose your way in life. There's so many distractions. There's so many ways. Like, I don't know about you, but it's frustrating if all of a sudden you look at your life and you think, man, my heart, I got a bad attitude. My heart's so hard. That's what happened. And it's so important for us to keep God number one, to heed these words of wisdom. And the second says, devote my hobbies and interests to God. Enjoy the creation that the Creator has given me. And I think it's impossible to say, I'm just going to not ever do anything because I don't want it to distract me from God. It's great to do things in life, but enjoy the creation God has given you, but most of all, love the Creator. We may not be building parks or having a cool in-house band, but God God made many wonderful things for us to enjoy in life. This is a blessing. Let's enjoy them, but at the same time, keep God number one. And the third says, be thankful for what God has given me in life. And I think a contentment with what we have, especially in this area of money and wealth, is really important. It's not about how much we have, it's about finding contentment with what we do have. Some of the most content people in life have very little. So it's not about the stuff. And then the final one is to read Ecclesiastes 2, or the whole book. It's about 12 chapters this week. My guess is if you start reading, you won't be able to put it down. At least that's how it usually hits me. But I want us to learn Solomon's wisdom is so great, and you can just see it as you read his writings. But it's so sad. Meaningless, like chasing the wind. We don't want to be there, right? We want to be like, I am so filled with joy because God is number one in leading me in life. That's what we want to be. So I challenge you, make the next step. Maybe evaluate, where are you at in all this? And how is God leading you? And what next steps you can take? And I want to pray for you as you do that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your wisdom, which is even greater than Solomon's, and this powerful lesson from his life. We want to use wisdom to do great things in life, and above all, to keep you number one. We pray you help us as we think about what our focus is on, our interests, our hobbies, our focus on money or wealth. And Lord, help us to learn from this wisdom, that we would find fulfillment and joy in life, that it wouldn't be meaningless. And so we just pray, help us as we react to this powerful story and we take next steps. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.